Iran just turned Khamenei's funeral into a warning Washington can't ignore. In Tehran, a funeral procession moves through the streets. Black flags, mourners in the thousands, a coffin that, for 4 months, had nowhere to go. Ali Khamenei, supreme leader of Iran, was killed on the 28th of February 2026, the opening minutes of a war that reshaped the Middle East. And yet only now, in early July, is Iran laying him to rest. Not days, not weeks, months. That delay should stop you. Shia tradition calls for burial within 24 hours. This funeral defies that by nearly 19 weeks. Because as Iran finalizes 6 days of ceremonies, stretching from Tehran to Qom, Najaf to Karbala, and finally Mashhad, American envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are sitting across from Qatari mediators in Doha talking about the Strait of Hormuz, talking about oil, talking indirectly to the very government staging this funeral. Is that a coincidence? Or is the funeral itself a message aimed not just at mourners in Tehran, but at the men in a hotel room in Doha? What most people miss is that this funeral isn't about closure, it's about leverage. The schedule tells its own story. July 3rd, a tribute ceremony in Tehran for foreign dignitaries. July 4th, 5th, public farewells at Imam Khomeini Musalla. July 6th, procession through the capital. Then the ceremonies leave Iran entirely July 7th in Qom, July 8th in Najaf and Karbala in Iraq, hosted by Iran-aligned popular mobilization units, before concluding July 9th in Mashhad, where Khamenei will be buried at the shrine of Imam Reza. This isn't one funeral, it's a 6-stop, 2-country tour of Iran's religious and political geography timed exactly as Doha talks unfold. On June 17th, Tehran and Washington struck an interim deal ending the U.S. naval blockade and granting Iran a 60-day oil export waiver. But the core dispute over Hormuz remains unresolved, and no direct U.S.-Iran meeting is yet confirmed. Just indirect talks, filtered through Qatari and Pakistani mediators. At the exact moment Iran needs to project strength, it's staging its largest ceremony since the war began. This war didn't start in February. It started in 2018, when the U.S. withdrew from the JCPOA nuclear deal and reimposed sanctions. By September 2025, UN snapback sanctions had collapsed Iran's currency and frozen its assets abroad. A 12-day war with Israel in June 2025 had already exposed cracks in Iran's defenses. Then, February 28th, Operation Epic Fury, nearly 900 U.S.-Israeli strikes in 12 hours, killing Khamenei and senior officials in a decapitation strike. Iran retaliated with hundreds of missiles and thousands of drones and moved to block Hormuz entirely. In January, before the war even ended, Iranian forces had killed thousands of protesters in the country's largest crackdown since 1979. By spring, Iran had a new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. But his father's funeral still waited. That gap between succession and ceremony is the detail worth sitting with. Regimes rarely delay funerals this long for logistics. They delay them to manage perception. This funeral carries 3 messages for 3 audiences. Domestically, Iran is still reeling from January's crackdown. A government commentator on the state-affiliated outlet Entekab openly warned that easing tensions could raise public expectations for wages, for lower inflation that the state can't meet. A grand funeral offers something the economy can't, a government-sanctioned, unifying emotional narrative that crowds out grievance. Regionally, staging processions in Najaf and Karbala hosted by Iran-aligned militias tells Washington that Tehran's alliance network survived the war intact. Any Hormuz deal isn't just with Iran's government, it has to hold across that wider network too. Diplomatically, the overlap with Doha isn't accidental. Project strength at home and negotiators gain room to make quiet concessions abroad without it looking like surrender. Underneath all 3 is an open question about Mojtaba Khamenei himself. Critics say the state stretched the funeral to inflate turnout artificially, and doubts about his condition persist. This may be less a farewell than an extended audition for a successor still trying to prove he commands the same authority his father did. The consequences are already visible in the numbers. Oil prices, which fell after the June 17th deal, are climbing again. Insurance rates for ships in Hormuz spiked after attacks on tankers, including a Qatari vessel that triggered a U.S. military response. Qatar and Oman are emerging as the indispensable brokers of this moment, more durable in some ways than either government they're mediating between. Beijing, meanwhile, has publicly endorsed Mojtaba Khamenei's succession as constitutional, keen to see a stable partner for its energy imports. But inside Iran, hardline lawmakers are pushing to impeach members of the very negotiating team in Doha. The closer Iran gets to a deal, the louder that resistance grows. And ceremony can't fix an economy. The IMF projects will hit nearly 69% inflation this year, the worst since 1979. It buys time, not solutions. From here, a few paths are realistic. Iran could consolidate. The funeral concludes smoothly. Foreign attendance lends Mojtaba Khamenei legitimacy, and negotiators return to Doha with real political cover to close a Hormuz deal. Or it could fracture. Economic pain and the impeachment push undercut the appearance of unity, forcing the regime to manage instability at home instead of finalizing anything abroad. A security incident is also plausible. IRGC members were already killed in an attack in Kermanshah days before the funeral began, claimed by a previously unknown group. Similar incidents during 6 days of mass gatherings could force security to take priority over diplomacy. Or the talks simply proceed independently, Oman's Hormuz proposal advancing on its own technical track, regardless of how the funeral plays domestically. Whichever path unfolds, one thing is already clear. Iran is negotiating on two stages at once, one built on ritual, the other on tanker insurance rates and quiet cables. So, why does a government wait 19 weeks to bury its own supreme leader? Not tradition, timing. This funeral was built to reach three audiences at once: an exhausted public, a regional network needing reassurance, and American negotiators watching to see if the government across the table can still make a deal stick. Ceremony can project strength for 6 days. It can't repair a collapsing currency, resolve lingering doubts about succession, or guarantee that a government capable of spectacle at home can honor commitments abroad. Khamenei will be buried July 9th in the city of his birth. The cameras will move on. And in Doha, the harder question will remain: can a government that just proved it can command a nation's grief also prove it can make peace?